أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقعتها كاذبة خافضة رافعة. إذا رجت الأرض رجا وبست الجبال بسا فكانت هباء منبثا وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثة فأصحاب الميمنة ما أصحاب الميمنة وأصحاب المشأمة ما أصحاب المشأمة والسابقون السابقون أولئك المقربون في جنات النعيم ثلة من الأولين وقليل من الآخرين على سرر موضونة متقين عليها متقابلين يطوف عليهم ولدان مخلدون بأكواب وأبارك وكأس من معين لا يصدعون عنها ولا ينزفون وفاكهة مما يتخيرون ولحم طير مما يشتهون وحور عين كأمثال اللؤلؤ المكنون جزاء بما كانوا يعملون لا يمسعون فيها لغوا ولا تأثيما إلا قيلا سلاما سلاما وأصحاب اليمين ما أصحاب اليمين في سدر مخدود وطلح مندود ودل ممدود وماء مسكوب وفاكهة كثيرة لا مقطوعة ولا ممنوعة وفرش مرفوعة إنا أنشأناهن إنشاء فجعلناهن أبكارا عربا أترابا لأصحاب اليمين ثلة من الأولين وثلة من الآخرين وأصحاب الشمال ما أصحاب الشمال في سموم وحميم ودل من يحموم لا بارد ولا كريم إنهم كانوا قبل ذلك المترفين وكانوا يسرون على الحنث العظيم وكانوا يقولون أئذا متنا وكنا ترابا وعظاما أئنا لمبعوثون أو آباؤنا الأولون قل إن الأولين والآخرين لمجموعون إلى ميقات يوم معلوم ثم إنكم أيها الضالون المكذبون لآكلون من شجر من زقوم فمالئون منها البطون فشاربون عليه من الحميم فشاربون شرب الحميم هذا نزلهم يوم الدين نحن خلقناكم فلولا تصدقون أفرأيتم ما تمنون أأنتم تخلقونه أم نحن الخالقون نحن قدرنا بينكم الموت وما نحن بمسبوقين على أن نبدل أمثالكم وننشئكم فيما لا تعلمون ولقد علمتم النشأة الأولى فلولا تذكرون أفرأيتم ما تحرثون أأنتم تزرعونه أم نحن الزارعون لو نشاء لجعلناه حطاما فظلتم تفكهون إنا لمغرمون بل نحن محرومون أفرأيتم الماء الذي تشربون أأنتم أنزلتموه من المزن أم نحن المنزلون لو نشاء جعلناه أجاجا فلولا تشكرون أفرأيتم النار التي تورون أأنتم أنشأتم شجرتها أم نحن المنشئون نحن جعلناها تذكرة ومتاعا للمقوين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم فلا أقسم بمواقع النجوم وإنه لقسم لو تعلمون عظيم إنه لقرآن كريم في كتاب مكنون لا يمسه إلا المطهرون تنزيل من رب العالمين أفبهذا الحديث أنتم مدهنون وتجعلون رزقكم أنكم تكذبون فلولا إذا بلغت الحلقوم وأنتم حينئذ تنظرون ونحن أقرب إليه منكم ولكن لا تبصرون فلولا إن كنتم غير مدينين ترجعونها إن كنتم صادقين فأما إن كان من المقربين فروح وريحان وجنة النعيم وأما إن كان من أصحاب اليمين فسلام لك من أصحاب اليمين وأما إن كان من المكذبين الضالين فنزل من حميم وتسلية جحيم إن هذا لهو حق اليقين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم صدق الله العلي العظيم.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله هيا على الصلاة هيا على الصلاة هيا على الفلاح هيا على الفلاح هيا على خير العمل هيا على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد وعلى محمد
بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللہم صلی. مسند غم بچھائی جاتی ہے، مسند غم بچھائی جاتی ہے، بزم ماتم سجائی جاتی ہے، مسند غم بچھائی جاتی ہے. رن کو اکبر چلے تو ماں نے کہا، رن کو اکبر چلے تو ماں نے کہا، رن کو اکبر چلے تو ماں نے کہا، عمر بھر کی کمائی جاتی ہے، مسند غم بچھائی جاتی ہے. خوں میں ڈوبے ہے یوں علی اکبر، خوں میں ڈوبے ہے یوں علی اکبر، جیسے چادر اڑائی جاتی ہے، مسند غم بچھائی جاتی ہے. کس کو گھیرے ہوئے ہے اہل حرم، کس کو گھیرے ہوئے ہے اہل حرم، کس کی منت بڑھائی جاتی ہے، مسند غم بچھائی جاتی ہے. تیر گردن پہ کھالوئے اصغر، تیر گردن پہ کھالوئے اصغر، تیر گردن پہ کھالوئے اصغر، پیاس یوں بھی بجھائی جاتی ہے، مسند غم بچھائی جاتی ہے. یاد آتی ہے ایک ننھی لحد، یاد آتی ہے ایک ننھی لحد، یاد آتی ہے ایک ننھی لحد، جب بھی شمع جلائی جاتی ہے، مسند غم بچھائی جاتی ہے. بولی زینب اٹھو اٹھو عابد، بولی زینب اٹھو اٹھو عابد، بولی زینب اٹھو اٹھو عابد، آگ گھر میں لگائی جاتی ہے، مسند غم بچھائی جاتی ہے، مسند ہم بچھائی جاتی ہے. بر محمد وال محمد صلوات.
صلوا علی محمد و آل محمد. آ گیا دیکھ یہ منزل میری، ہمشیر بہن میری ماں جائے، میری زینب دلگیر بہن. پوچھو نہ ہم سے یہ جنگل یہ زمیں کیسی ہے، کہتے ہیں کرب و بلا ہے یہی، جاگیر بہن آ گیا دیکھ یہ منزل میری. نہر کو دیکھ کے آنسو جو تیرے بہتے ہیں، پیاسا بچہ میرا مر جائے گا، بے شیر بہن آ گیا دیکھ یہ منزل میری. دل جو گھبراتا ہے جنگل کی ہوا سے تیرا، اس پر درد زمیں کی ہے یہ تاثیر بہن آ گیا دیکھ یہ منزل میری. کیا قبالے میں لکھوں نام علی اکبر کا، قبر کی پائے جگہ ہے یہی، تدبیر بہن آ گیا دیکھ یہ منزل میری. دل تو ٹکڑے میرا اور ہوگا شکستہ بازو زخم دل کس کو بتائے گئے شبیر بہن آ گیا دیکھ یہ منزل میری چھلنی ہو جائے گا داغوں سے جگر جب میرا تب گلا میرا بھی ہوگا تہے شمشیر بہن آ گیا دیکھ یہ منزل میری ہمشیر بہن میری ماں جائی میری زینب دلگیر بہن اور محمد وآل محمد صلوات ارواح المؤمنین والمؤمنات سورة المنازل الفاتحة.
Sheikh Azhar Nasser, respected elders, dearest brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum, Jameen wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all marhumin listed on the screen, as well as all other marhumin. Suratul Mubarakatul Fatiha. Dua Shafa'i Mariz is requested for all those who are in need here and elsewhere. Let us recite together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibu al-mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakhshifu as-su'. Amma yujibu al-mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakhshifu as-su'. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. Ya Allah. Brothers and sisters are requested to donate towards the Muharram Fund. Please see Brother Abbas Alu or Subtain Yusufali in the men's side, or Sister Fatima Abdul Hussein in the sister's side to make a donation. You may also use the QR code displayed on the screen in order to donate. The annual Muharram blood drive will inshallah be tomorrow. Please refer to the weekly newsletter or the WhatsApp broadcast for more information. We'll now inshallah have majlis by Sheikh Azhar. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله، صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة ويا عبرة كل مؤمن ومؤمنة، يا ليتنا فيا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. قال تعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، ما عندكم ينفد وما عند الله باق. صدق الله العلي العظيم. عطروا أفواهكم وزينوا مجالسكم بذكر الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Over the past few nights, we've been sharing some reflections on the merits and the excellence of the Quran. And we began our discussion on the first night with a tradition from Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, where he speaks about the status and the position of the Holy Quran on the Day of Judgment as an intercessor for the believers. And we mentioned that when a believer enters into paradise, their placement in Jannah will depend on their relationship with the Holy Quran. How much of the Quran were they able to internalize? We also spoke about the concept of tanzeel. And we mentioned that when Allah speaks about the sending down of the Quran, what it means is that the Quran, which exists in Alamul Indiyya, in those higher worlds, in a form that does not contain any linguistic expression. It is absolute. It is infinite. It is a representation of God's infinite knowledge. When that Quran, which is in Lawh al-Mahfuz, which is Kitabun Maknoon, when it is set down, the meaning of it is that the Quran is simplified and it is brought down to the lower worlds in a form that is conducive to the properties of these lower worlds. And we also highlighted that when the Quran is sent down from Lawh al-Mahfuz, it does not depart those higher worlds. It remains. إِنَّهُ لَقُرْآنٌ كَرِيمٌ فِي كِتَابٍ مَكْنُونٍ. The Quran exists. It is not absent from those higher worlds. Typically, when something descends, it departs. It is no longer present in those higher locations because it descends and now it occupies a lower position, and that higher position is now absent. It is absent of that thing. But the Quran exists in Lawh al-Mahfuz. It has never departed. And the Quran that we have, that has descended to Alamul Dunya, is an image of that Quran. It is a manifestation of what is in Alamul Indiyya. And we spoke about the meaning of Alamul Indiyya. When Allah says Indallah or Ladunna, we said it refers to those higher worlds which are free from the limitations and the restrictions that characterize the lower worlds. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in many verses in the Quran, He says, "Inna ja'alnahu Qur'anan Arabiyya." We made it into an Arabic Quran, a Quran that has a linguistic expression, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, so that you can understand it. And what this verse implies is that in those higher worlds, we are not able to perceive the realities of the Quran. It has to be simplified. In the same way that when there's a complex concept, teachers, they simplify it through examples. But the example does not negate the complex concept. It remains. So therefore, the Quran has two dimensions. And last night we concluded, based on numerous ahadith, based on verses of the Quran, that the Prophet describes the Quran as hablun mamdud. It is a rope that is extended from the higher worlds to us. So there is one part of the Quran that is in Allah, that is in those higher worlds, and there is another, the other end of the rope is in our hands. And if we want to ascend to alamul indiyya, to those higher worlds, if we want to purify ourselves, refine our souls, whereby we are able to occupy those higher worlds in the hereafter, we have to commit ourselves to the Quran. And this is why Allah in the Quran, He says about shuhada, and we've mentioned this, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ. Not everyone in the hereafter is liberated in the same way. Our souls have different capacities. And those who have been able to purify themselves occupy higher levels of paradise. And their souls are less restricted than those who occupy the lower worlds. And therefore you find that the Quran that exists with us today, the Quran that was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, is the Quran that has gone through this process of tanzeel. It has underwent this process of change to make it suitable for alamul dunya. However, what's astonishing is that even the Quran that has been simplified, that has linguistic expression in the form of surahs and ayat, only the heart of the Prophet had the capacity to receive it. So even when the Quran goes through the process of tanzeel, no one has the capability, the capacity to receive that weighty word except the qalb of Rasulullah. And Muslim scholars for centuries have written many commentaries on the Quran, and these commentaries are simply scraping the surface of the simplified Quran. And this is truly astonishing. Whether you're talking about Tafsir al-Tibyan by Shaykh al-Tusi, whether you're talking about Tafsir Majma' al-Bayan by Shaykh al-Tabrasi, whether you're speaking about Tafsir al-Mizan by Allama al-Tabatabai, or the Tafsir of Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli, who's a contemporary scholar who has written 100 volumes. It is the biggest tafsir in the Islamic tradition, 100 volumes, tafsir of the Quran. This tafsir is of what? It's just scratching the surface of the Quran that has been simplified through the process of tanzeel. Only Ahlul Bayt, only the Prophet and his purified progeny, they are the only ones who are able to touch the meanings of those profound concepts that exist in Lawh al-Mahfuz. La yamassuhu illa al-mutahharun. They're the only ones who can touch it, who have access to those deep meanings. Now, when we speak about Alam al-Dunya, we mentioned that when we reflect on the creation of Allah, what we experience, what we see, represents only a tiny sliver of what Allah has actually created. The observable universe as we know it is a portion of Alam al-Dunya. You know, even scientists, they say that what we see with our telescopes, what we understand through our mathematical models, represents only 4% of the universe. 96% of the universe, according to scientists, is dark energy, meaning they don't even know what it is. So there's much that is inaccessible to us. So Alamul Indiyya, you have these higher worlds that are non-physical. And then you have the physical world, Alamul Dunya. These are two separate worlds. They are two separate planes of existence. However, sometimes these two worlds interact with each other. Sometimes there is an interaction between Alamul Dunya and Alamul Indiyya. Now there are some things that happen to us do not have any reflection in that world. What do I mean? If someone loses their memory, and let's say that they're not even able to recall, if you ask them, who's your Lord? They won't remember because they have an illness. This physical condition has no bearing on what is reflected in that higher world. That doesn't have an effect on their soul, because as we know, brothers and sisters, human beings, we are unique creatures because we are connected to Alamul Dunya and Alamul Indiyya, that spiritual world. We're connected to the physical world by virtue of our bodies, but we are also connected to the spiritual world because Allah, when He created us, what does He say about the creation of Adam? فَإِذَا سَوَّيْتُهُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. Because we have ruh. And that ruh is from that higher world. The body is from the lower world. The ruh is from the higher world. Now, malaika, angels, unlike human beings, they don't have a connection to Alamud Dunya. What do we mean by this? Malaika are not physical creatures. They're not physical entities. They're purely rational beings. And they are beyond this physical world. They do a lot of things that affect dunya, but we don't really understand how they interact with Alam al-Dunya. This is why on many occasions malaika have to take a physical form in order to interact with those who inhabit Alam al-Dunya. Now, there are some things in dunya that we think are important, but they actually have no value in those higher worlds. For example, if people praise you, say that you're not a good person, but let's say you have a good reputation and people praise you for being pious, for being righteous, for being God-fearing. The amount of praise and fame you have in dunya has no bearing on your position in those higher worlds. That's why sometimes, I reflect on people who are famous in dunya, but they're famous in dunya, but they're infamous in those higher worlds. What we want as mu'mineen is to be famous in the assembly of angels. These are the assemblies that matter. Now, because we have a physical reality and this spiritual reality, the way that we can create an interaction between alamul dunya and alamul indiya is that we have to give a spiritual coloring to our actions. For example, the act of feeding a hungry person, that act is a physical action. And if someone performs this action, that action is bound to alamud dunya. It's a worldly action. However, if we want this action to have a spiritual dimension, we have to give the action a spiritual characteristic. And that means that we do it with the intention of seeking nearness to Allah. What happens when we make a niyyah? We give this physical activity a spiritual dimension, and therefore you create this connection to that higher world. Now, if we do good deeds that are devoid of proper niyyah, what happens is we limit the impact of that action. We limit that action to dunya. This is why, brothers and sisters, there are many people who give charity. The physical act of giving charity, many people are generous. They give charity. But they may not do it with the spiritual intention of attaining nearness to God. And what we see is when this action is devoid of a connection to Allah, when it's devoid of that spiritual quality, what happens is that action is limited and its impact is also limited. It's perishable. Many people have given charity and no one remembers it, or the effect of it, the benefit of it is temporary, it's fleeting. However, when Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, when they give those loaves of bread, Allah reveals an entire surah about it in the Quran, and that act of charity. So you have people that give millions and it's forgotten, it's perished. Ahlul Bayt, they give a few loaves of bread, but they do it purely for the sake of Allah. Allah preserves that action, and that action serves as a source of inspiration for people until the day of judgment to be selfless. Why does their action have this impact? Because they gave this physical action a spiritual quality. It was done with a niyyah, and it created an interaction with that higher world, and anything that is connected to that higher world does not perish. This is why Allah says with the ayah that I began with in Surah An-Nahl, Surah 16, verse 96, a part of the ayah says what? مَا عِنْدَكُمْ يَنْفَدْ. What is with you will perish. What is with you in dunya, what is dunyawi in its characteristics will perish. وَمَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ بَاقٍ. But what is عِنْدَ Allah, what is done that has a reflection in that higher world is preserved. It is preserved. There is a narration that mentions that the Prophet ﷺ, he was once gifted a sheep. The meat of a sheep was given to the Prophet as a gift. The Prophet, on this evening, when he was gifted this meat, he was with Aisha. And the Prophet ﷺ, being the generous person that he is, he gave all of the meat away except the shoulder, except a small part, a shoulder. The rest of the meat of the sheep, he distributed it to the people. When Aisha saw that the Prophet had given away the majority of the meat, she said, Ya Rasulullah, you gave away all of the meat and all that remains is the shoulder. She said, you gave the entire sheep away, the meat, all of the meat, you've given it away. And the only thing that has remained is what? Is the shoulder. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, la basallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. You know, sometimes, because this is a virtual majlis, I don't see the attendees, and sometimes we speak and we have an entire majlis without the remembrance of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So it's important for us to pepper our majalis with the salawat upon Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi, he says to Aisha, she says, Ya Rasulullah, everything, you have given everything away, and all that remains from the meat of the sheep is the shoulder. Rasulullah says, no. What I have given has remained. And the shoulder is, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, the shoulder is what has been consumed. This is what I have given away is what actually remains. Meaning the food that we are going to eat, this is what is perishing. So in reality, what remained, O Aisha, is what I gave away, because that was purely for the sake of Allah. And this physical action of giving something away, when there is a proper niyyah, you create this interaction with those spiritual realms, with those higher worlds. And as the Quran said, مَا عِنْدَكُمْ يَنْفَدْ, what is with you, what you consume is lost. It's perishable. But what is with Allah, what is عند Allah, that is what remains. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, in a number of verses, He emphasizes the idea of أَيْنَمَا تُوَلُّوا فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ. Wherever you go, you will find the face of Allah. Now this expression is found in the Quran. And there are a lot of commentaries about this ayah, about what is the meaning of this verse. What does it mean when Allah says, wherever you turn, you shall find, you shall encounter the face of Allah? Some of the Mufassirin have a very beautiful explanation of this expression, this ayah. They say, of course, Allah doesn't have a physical face, but the face is the point of interaction. When you meet someone, you interact with people through their faces, because your face is where your eyes are, where your mouth is, you communicate. So this is the most important point of interaction. You encounter people and you interact with them through your facial expressions and the organs that are on your face. The Mufassirin, they say, أَيْنَمَا تَوَلُّ فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ. What it means is you can experience and you can have an interaction and an encounter with Allah in any place and at any time. Meaning, no matter where you are in Alamud Dunya, you can have that interaction with that higher world. You don't need to be in a masjid. You don't need to be in a specific place. Of course, there are sacred places. There are holy places on earth. But you can have a connection with Allah anywhere. At work. You can have a connection with Allah when you're driving to work, when you're sitting with your family. Do not limit the spiritual experiences to the musalla or the masjid or ziyarah. Everywhere, wherever you are, wherever you go, you can have an interaction with Allah. You can have an encounter with Him. You can meet Him. You can see Him. You can appreciate His beauty. And this is why Amir al-Mu'mineen, salawatullahi alayhi, he says, ما رأيت شيئا إلا وقد رأيت الله قبله وبعده ومعه. Imam says, I have never seen anything except that I saw Allah before it, because Allah is the originator of everything. And I saw Allah after it, meaning I recognize that that thing will perish and Allah will remain. And I also recognize that Allah is with everything, because at every moment He sustains it. Meaning, Amir al-Mu'min is teaching us that you can find God, you can have a connection with Allah in this life at every moment. Every single thing can remind you of Allah. Whether you're looking at a plant, or you're looking at a human being, or you're looking at a star, you know that Allah existed before those things. He originated them. Allah will continue to exist after those things perish. And that plant and that star and that human being, at every moment Allah is sustaining them. أَيْنَمَا تَوَلُّ فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ. Wherever you go, you can witness the face of God. But the problem is, we are blinded by creation. Creation was meant to connect us to God, but oftentimes the world around us has become a hijab. If you look at creation and you make the dunya and the makhluqat your aim, you will be blinded by them. But if you look through them, you will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's the same, if we give the analogy of a mirror. If you look at the mirror, you won't see anything. It's blinding. But if you look through the mirror, you'll be able to see. Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he speaks about dunya, he said, "Man absara ilayha," the one who looks at it becomes blind. أعمته. وَمَنْ أَبْصَرَ بِهَا بَصَّرَتُ. But whoever looks through it, you're able to make connections to those higher worlds, those higher realities, then you will develop insight. My dear brothers and sisters, as we approach the eve of the 5th of Muharram, this night is typically a night in which we remember the ashab of Imam al-Hussein, particularly the leader of the ashab of Imam al-Hussein, Habib ibn Madahir al-Asadi. My dear brothers and sisters, when you look at the biographies of the Ahlul Bayt, what's amazing is that all of the other mahsumeen, they were calling their companions to them. They were inviting their companions to support them. However, with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he's the only ma'soom who begs his companions to leave him, to go save your lives. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he gave them permission to leave. But all of them remained committed. They were devoted to Imam al-Hussein. They were loyal to Imam al-Hussein. So much so that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he says about his ashab, he says, فَإِنِّي لَا أَعْلَمُ أَصْحَابًا أَوْفَى وَلَا خَيْرًا مِنْ أَصْحَابِي. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he says, I do not know of any companions, whether they are the companions of the Prophet, the companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the companions of previous prophets. Imam says, I don't know any companions of any of Allah's hujjaj who are more loyal and more virtuous than my companions. The companions of Imam al-Hussein, brothers and sisters, we are in awe of them, because Imam al-Hussein gave them permission to leave. If they left, they would have never been held accountable on the Day of Judgment. Imam said, go, you will not be held accountable. But the fact that even after Imam al-Hussein gave them permission, they still were steadfast. They refused. Imam al-Hussein, on the eve of Ashura, he tells Hilal ibn Nafi' that, oh Hilal ibn Nafi' was worried about Imam al-Hussein. He sees him strolling around the camp on the eve of Ashura, and he says to him, Aba Abdullah, it's nighttime. We're surrounded by these wicked people. I'm afraid for you, O Imam. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he looks at Hilal, he says, listen, they have come for me. They only want me. Imam al-Hussein, he points at a nearby hill. He says, do you see those two hills? Why don't you go? I give you permission to leave. Go and save yourself. Hilal ibn Nafi', he says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, and what will I do if I escape? The Imam says, so you can live. Hilal, he says, قَبَّحَ اللَّهُ الْعَيْشُ بَعْدَكَ يَا أَبَا عَبْدِ اللَّهِ. What value does life have after you, Ya Aba Abdullah? When Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was approaching Karbala, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam wrote a letter to Kufa. In this letter, he sends a letter to Habib ibn Madahir. Habib was not with Imam al-Hussein initially. He arrived later. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, in the letter to Habib ibn Madahir, what does he say? If you look at how Imam al-Hussein addresses Habib ibn Madahir, wallah, brothers and sisters, you will know, you will get a glimpse into who this man is. Imam al-Hussein, in his letter, he writes, من الحسين ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib إلى الرجل الفقيه Habib ibn Madahir. Imam al-Hussein, he calls Habib ibn Madahir al-Faqih, the scholar. Imagine, Imam al-Hussein recognizes Habib not just as a warrior, not just as someone who's devoted to the Ahlul Bayt, as a lover of the Ahlul Bayt. He calls him a faqih, someone who has deep knowledge of Islam. He says to him that, you know my situation, O Habib. And Imam al-Hussein, Sayyidah Zainab, they lived in Kufa for a number of years when Amir al-Mu'mineen was running the Islamic world, when his government was established there. The women of Bani Hashim had close relationships with Sayyidah Zainab. The family of Habib ibn Madahir, the women of his family, they had a close relationship with the family of the Prophet. His women had a close relationship with Sayyidah Zainab. Imam, in the letter, he says to him that, you know my situation, O Habib, and I ask you not to fall short in supporting me. Imam al-Hussein sends this letter. It arrives in Kufa. Habib ibn Madahir is eating. When he receives the letter that Imam al-Hussein is calling upon him, he took the food out of his mouth and immediately he prepares to leave. The narrations say, brothers and sisters, that he arrives. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam had flags for each of the tribes that had come to support him, and there was one flag that had no bearer. They said, the companions of Imam al-Hussein, they said to him, who does this flag belong to? Imam alayhi salam, he says, the one who will hold this flag will soon arrive. The narrations mention that Habib ibn Madahir, he mounts his horse and he rides from the outskirts of Kufa to the plains of Karbala, the camp of Imam al-Hussein. They see a dust cloud coming from the direction of Kufa. They say to him, Ya Aba Abdullah, someone is coming from the direction of Kufa. He says to them that I think it is my beloved, my companion, Habib ibn Madahir. The narrations say that when Habib arrives, Imam al-Hussein begins to smile. The narrations say that the only thing that made Imam al-Hussein smile from the moment that he arrived in Karbala until the day of Ashura was the arrival of Habib ibn Madahir. Imam al-Hussein, he embraces Habib. He is the friend of Habib. He is the friend of Imam al-Hussein. He is the companion of Imam al-Hussein. He was a companion of Rasulullah. He was a companion of Amir al-Mu'mineen. They have a long history together. Habib ibn Madahir, he says to Imam al-Hussein, Aba Abdullah, do you give me permission to go and send my salam to Sayyida Zainab? He says to Habib, yes. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam sends Aliyun al-Akbar to accompany Habib. Habib ibn Madahir, he goes close to the tent of Sayyida Zainab. He stands at the entrance of the tent and he calls out, Assalamu alaykum ya Allah, Assalamu alaykum ya ala Rasulillah. Peace be upon you, O the people of God. Peace be upon you, O the family of Rasulullah. Peace be upon you, O Zainab, the daughter of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam, she puts on the cloak, the hijab, the abaya of her mother Fatima. She says, Wa alayka salam ya Habib. And then Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam, she says to him, she says, Ya Habib. She points at Imam al-Hussein. She says, La tuqassir fi nusrati hadha al-gharib. Oh Habib, do not fall short in supporting this stranger. And she points to Imam al-Hussein. Habib ibn Madahir, he begins to cry. He takes off his turban. He puts sand on his head. They say to him, Ya Habib, what's the matter? He says, who am I that the daughter of Amir al-Mu'mineen addresses me? The narrations say that on the day of Ashura, Imam al-Hussein gave the left wing, he gave the command of the left wing of the army to Habib. Habib, on the eve of Ashura, he gathered the companions and he said to them that do not allow a single member of the Ahlul Bayt to go to the battlefield. We have to shed our blood. We should be the first ones to sacrifice. The narrations say that Habib, when he goes to the battlefield and he is struck with a fatal wound, the face of Imam al-Hussein changed color. Imam al-Hussein was grief-stricken when he saw Habib and he cried out, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. The Imam alayhi salam, he says, عند الله أحتسب وحماة أصحابي. I am observing patience even though I have lost the protector among my companions. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to bless us, to guide us, to illuminate our hearts with the teachings of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to enable us to be among the zuwar of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in this life. And we ask Allah to include us among those who receive the shafa'ah, the intercession of Imam al-Hussein and his noble companions on the Day of Judgment. يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.
Hussein, Ya 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 Hussein. اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین آئینہ آئینہ آئین الحسین. اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین آئینہ آئینہ آئین الحسین. اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین. اے لال میرا بتاؤ کہاں جنت سے آئی ہوں سن لو فغاں. زہرا تھی کربل میں نوحہ کنا جنت سے شدت سے کرتی تھی غم کو بیاں. ماں کو دکھا دے تو چہرہ حسین. اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین آئینہ آئینہ آئین الحسین. اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین آئینہ آئینہ آئین الحسین. اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین. سوچا نہ تھا ایسا ہوگا کبھی بے مک نہ رہ جائے زینب میری. کس جرم کی یہ سزا مل گئی قیدی بنے آج بنت علی. دشمن نہ سمجھے گا رتبہ حسین. اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین آئینہ آئینہ آئین الحسین. اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین آئینہ آئینہ آئین الحسین. اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین. قاسم نہیں میرا اکبر نہیں آنو محمد وہ اصغر نہیں. لاشیں ہے بکھری مگر سر نہیں سر پر سکینہ کے چادر نہیں. ہاں لٹ گیا تیرا خنبہ حسین. اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین آئینہ آئینہ آئین الحسین. اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین آئینہ آئینہ آئین الحسین. اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین. کربل میں ہے ماں کے نالے حسین آگوش احمد کے پالے حسین. رب کی رضا پانے والے حسین ہے مطمئن آس والے حسین. کتنا یہ محکم ہے رشتہ حسین. اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین آئینہ آئینہ آئین الحسین. اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین. سینے پہ سونے کی عادی تھی وہ اب خاک پر کیسے سوئے گی وہ. شام غریبہ سے خائف تھی وہ یہ کہہ کے مقتل پہ جاتی تھی وہ. بستر ہے بابا کا سینہ حسین. اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین آئینہ آئینہ آئین الحسین. اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین. زہرا بھی کربل میں گش کھا گئی جب لاش اکبر نظر آ گئی. فریاد زہرا بلند ہو گئی، سر پیٹ کر وہ یہ کہنے لگی، ہو تسلیت ماں کے تشنا حسین، اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین، آئینہ آئینہ آئین الحسین، اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین، آئینہ آئینہ آئین الحسین، اے جان زہرا مظلوم حسین،
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین، جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا لے چل مجھے، جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا لے چل مجھے، جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا لے چل مجھے، روزہ شبیر پر دوں گا دعا لے چل مجھے، جانے والے کربلا ہے جہاں گنج شہیدہ، ہے جہاں نہر فرات، ہے جہاں گنج شہیدہ، ہے جہاں نہر فرات، جس جگہ سید میرا پیار سارا حالے چل مجھے، جانے والے جس جگہ جاگی تھی قسمت حر کی وہ دیکھوں گا میں، جس جگہ جاگی تھی قسمت حر کی وہ دیکھوں گا میں، آسیوں پر کیسے ہوتی ہے عطا لے چل مجھے، جانے کربلا لے چل مجھے، جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا لے چل مجھے، جس جگہ عباس کے بازو قلم ہو کر گرے، جس جگہ عباس کے بازو قلم ہو کر گرے، اس جگہ میں بھی کروں ماتم ذرا لے چل مجھے، جانے والے کربلا کے کربلا 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 لے چل مجھے،
یا حسین 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 یا حسین،
حشر میں رنگ
لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا، حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا، حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا، حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا، حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا، آئیں گی جب فاطمہ، آئیں گی جب فاطمہ، حال پر حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا روبرو بابا کے جب خاتون جنت آئے گی خالی جولی سرورے کونین کو دکھلائے گی بلیہ کی دھرائے گا بلیہ کی دھرائے گا محشر کا میدان دیکھنا حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا رکھ دیا برچی نے اکبر کا کلیجہ چیر کے رخ بدل ڈالے ہیں امت نے تیری تصویر کے مالک کو سر ذرا مالک کو سر ذرا امت کے احسان دیکھنا حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ 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 دیکھنا اصغر معصوم کے لب پر سوال آب ہے بوند پانی کے لیے وہ کس قدر بیتاب ہے نہر سے پانی نہیں نہر سے پانی نہیں دیتے مسلمان دیکھنا حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا زینب و کلثوم سے کہتا تشمرے بد گوہر شام میں جاؤ گے ننگے سر پہ روگی در بدر کربلا کے بعد اب کربلا کے بعد اب تاریخ زندہ دیکھنا حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ 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 دیکھنا غم بلا گلزار کا اس دل کو روزے حشر کا جو ہے اولاد پیمبر کی محبت سے بھرا بخشوا دیں گے اسے بخشوا دیں گے اسے یثرب کے سلطان دیکھنا حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیدہ دیکھنا حشر میں رنگ لائے گا شہیداں دیکھنا حشر میں رنگ لائے گا خون شہیداں دیکھنا یا حسین 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 پر محمد و آل محمد صلوات.
السلام علیکہ یا رسول اللہ، السلام علیکہ یا امیر المؤمنین، السلام علیکہ یا فاطمۃ الزہرا سیدۃ نساء العالمین، السلام علیکہ یا حسن المجتبی، السلام علیکہ یا اختک زینب، السلام علی الحسین وعلی علی ابن الحسین وعلی اولاد الحسین وعلی اصحاب الحسین جمیعاً شہداء کربلا ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ. السلام علیکہ یا مولا وابن مولا، السلام علیکہ یا غریب الغربا، السلطان ابو الحسن علی ابن موسیٰ الرضا، کن شفیعنا و شفیع والدینا فی یوم الجزا ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ. السلام علیکہ یا امام صاحب العصر والزمان، الامان الامان الامان. السلام علیکہ یا خلیفۃ الرحمن، السلام علیکہ یا شریک القرآن، السلام علیکہ یا کعبۃ الایمان، السلام علیکہ یا امام الانس والجان، اجر اللہ تعالی فرجک وسحر اللہ تعالی مخرجک وظہورک وجعلنا من انصارک ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ. اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد. اللہم کل ولیک الحجۃ ابن الحسن صلواتک علیہ وعلی آبائہ فی ہذہ الساعة وفی کل ساعة ولیا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودلیلا وعینا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.